This series really did not stick the landing, and I'm still upset about it. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be doing my July wrap-up. Alright, before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what was your most unexpected read of the month. So first, peep the new shelves. Yep, this is our new setup. I'm still over the moon about it. I actually filmed a bookshelf setup / we'll eventually get to a new bookshelf tour here, so keep your eyes peeled for those. That's not what we're here for. We're here for a wrap up of my July reads. I will have one book from June just because it was the only book that I didn't get read in time to film my last wrap up video. So I'm gonna just toss it in here. As per usual with a wrap up, let's first start out with my stats. So for the month, I read 9 books, and across those 9 books, I read 2,719 pages. That does include converting audiobook hours to pages, but in regard to audiobook hours, I read about 34 hours overall. That's definitely a decline from the previous month though. My average rating did go up though. I had 3.83 stars, and thankfully I only had 1 DNF this month. For my genre breakdown, I was pretty across the board with these. I had 1 fantasy, 2 graphic novels, 1 horror, 1 magical realism, 1 manga, 1 mystery, 1 nonfiction, and 1 romance. For the little goals I keep for myself, I did read a nonfiction book. Obviously, I had 1 book that was over 450 pages, and I also read a comic book. In regards to series stats, I continued 5 series and I finished 1, which is awesome. I absolutely love seeing high numbers in this stat in particular. I'm gonna be a little lazy when it comes to a breakdown for my wrap up this month. We're just gonna go in the order that I read these books. So starting out with the book that I read in June, actually, I read They Call This Enemy by George Takei. This is a graphic memoir detailing his life as a child when his family was actually put into a Japanese internment camp. And it's definitely a very hard read, but at the same time, it's very interesting seeing these events play out through the eyes of a child. It's incredibly emotional, but at the same time, the story is completely enveloping. It's an incredibly important read. I think this is definitely a piece of history in the US that gets glossed over quite often, unfortunately. The entirety of the story is phenomenally told, and the art pairs very well with it. I also like that the events of the graphic novel didn't just stop after his family left the internment camp. He then discussed how those events really impacted him growing up, his relationship with his parents whenever they started to discuss it as he became older and was better able to understand what they really experienced, and then how his memories of that have affected his life now as an actor, as a philanthropist. It's very educational, but it's incredibly heart-wrenching. It was phenomenally done. I have nothing else to say about it. It was 5 stars. Next up is one that was such a letdown. This is such a drop in ratings here. I attempted to finish out the Kingdom of Souls trilogy by Rena Barron with the most recent installment, Master of Souls. This would have rounded out the series. Adored the first book in this series. The synopsis you are given at the start is like maybe the first 150 pages, and then things just go off the wall from there. It grows so much. The world, the magic system, all of that was very enveloping. I really enjoyed those elements of the story, but my God, in this last one, the character work was just not doing it for me. It felt like all of these characters had no plan at all. Oh, it was so frustrating to watch them just stumble around and try to put the pieces together, especially when they're constantly just not communicating with each other. I had so many logistic issues in what was happening where I'd be reading and realize like, wait, this makes no sense. Like how could this possibly happen? There's a separate character who we see from that, technically speaking, is the age of a child, and yet at one point in her perspective there's discussions around her like trying to seduce somebody. That felt so uncomfortable. Did not like that. We also see through the perspective of the villain character. He's supposed to be one of those, you know, ageless beings, and yet his perspective read like a moody teenager. And then because of that, it was incredibly hard to take him seriously. So finally, I was just so upset with how all of these characters were being written. I had no idea where the plot could possibly go because, again, the characters seem to have no plans themselves. Finally, I messaged Ray at Bookmark Chronicles and asked her if it was worth it to try and push through. When she told me no, I took that as reasoning enough for me to DNF this. I was about 33% in, and this is so incredibly sad because I gave the first book like a 4.5 stars. This series really did not stick the landing, and I'm still upset about it. Next, I read volume 9 of Miss Marvel, Teenage Wasteland, and I guess I'll give the writers this. The story in this one was definitely pretty different. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, as I definitely did not appreciate how Kamala's realization from the previous volume was really handled in this. I liked what we saw from that in volume 8, but the ending of it and how Kamala had responded to that realization, I didn't really enjoy that. There's also this weird love triangle square thing that I've not been a fan of since the beginning, and I just feel like it's really unnecessary because it's so underdeveloped. I guess the reemergence of it in this volume did mean that I got to see more of one of my favorite side characters, Bruno, so I was happy about that. I mean, I enjoy a slice of life chapter every once in a while when I'm reading comic book series, but this one just was not what I wanted. In the end, unfortunately, this came out to like 3 stars, which is really a shame because I had felt like this series had finally hit its stride, but it sort of feels like they just kind of did this here at the end. Next up though, thankfully, I continued with a separate series though that went much better for me, Marriage and Murder by Penny Reid. This is the second book in the Solving for Pi series, which is a spinoff of the Winston Brothers series. I've talked about the Winston Brothers series a million times. These are basically cozy mysteries following Cletus and Jennifer from the 3rd book in the Winston Brothers series. They take new steps in their relationship, but also end up solving crimes around their small town. We actually saw portions of this mystery in, I want to say it was like 6.5, 5.5 or 6.5 in the Winston Brothers series, which is a separate book following different characters who aren't directly tied to the Winston family, but we actually got an official resolution to the mystery in this one. Unsurprisingly, I continue to adore Cletus and Jen. I just love watching them be in love with each other because they're so freaking precious. I would originally figure this series as like cozy mysteries from the synopsis you get for them, but really this one is much more of a romance. It is a lot heavier on the spice than the first one was. I'm not really complaining about that, but you know, there's a little bit of a difference in expectations. Beard in Hiding, I had that written in my notes. Beard in Hiding was 5.5. I think there was also a little bit of this mystery in Dr. Strangebeard, which was book 5 also. So there you go. The mystery in this one, same as the first, it wasn't particularly shocking, but I will say it did take some turns that I wasn't anticipating. All in all, these books just bring me so much happiness. Reid's characters on the whole bring me so much happiness, which is why I keep reading these. I need the next one and I need it now. The next 2 books in this series have been titled, but no official publishing date has been released, and that is a travesty. I need them now. Oh my gosh, Penny Reid, please. I just want more content revolving around the Winston family. This one came out to 4 stars. I couldn't give it anything less because it's just so freaking adorable. Water break. Seeing as how Marriage and Murder ended up being more of a romance, I was still craving a bit of a mystery, meaning I decided to return to another cozy mystery series, the Tita Rosie's cozy mystery series. The second book, Homicide and Hallo Hallo, I picked up on audio. This one is picking up from the first Arsenic and Adobo, where we are following our main character, Leela, and her family. She and her best friend have opened a cafe. At the same time, Leela ends up getting volunteered to be a judge for a beauty pageant in her town. But of course, it's a cozy mystery series. one of the other judges, who was a bit of a skeevy dude, ends up dying and Layla's in the middle of it. In the past, I had really debated on whether or not I was going to continue this series because I liked the first book. It didn't really stand out too much, but I was feeling a cozy mystery and I remembered this series, thought I'd try it out again. And I can once again say I'm not really sure if I'm gonna continue this series because this book was fine. I had some pros and I had some negatives, and I had so many feelings about so much in this book that like it's very hard for me to put my thoughts into cohesive paragraphs. Rather, my notes are literally a pros and cons list, so I'm gonna work through that with y'all. Pros: I love the representation in the series thus far when it comes to characters. Race, sexuality, disability, all wonderful, all well incorporated into the cast. Absolutely knows how to write food in an appetizing way. Anytime I was reading this, I was consistently hungry. Everything Layla eats or makes sounds delicious. The mystery, although not incredibly engaging, or really a lot of the time it didn't even feel like the main driving part of the story. I'll admit, I still think the ending twist was pretty well done because personally I did not see that coming. And then I appreciated the mental health discussions that were taking place in this book. Layla is suffering from PTSD off of the events of the prior book, and it's discussed how many communities still have a really difficult time talking about mental health and acknowledging mental illnesses or treating them with medication or therapy, and I thought that was well done also. But now onto my cons. Dear God, I cannot stand Layla as a main character. She's very whiny, she's really oblivious, she's pretty naive. I'm not a fan of being in her perspective. Next, I know this is a cozy mystery, but the dialogue feels very weirdly upbeat constantly, even when they're talking about some really serious things. And yes, I get it, it's a cozy mystery, like it's supposed to be a little bit more lighthearted than a traditional mystery or thriller. It just made certain scenes where they're talking about very heavy things feel really disingenuous. And then my biggest issue with this book is there are so many side plots going on. Oh my God. There is a love triangle which was instituted in the first book, but for some reason it gets kind of wrapped up really quickly in this one. I have no feelings about the love interest character at all. I didn't have any feelings about the secondary one either. There's this weird, strained relationship that Layla has with her cousin Bernadette that honestly, in this one in particular, feels really juvenile. I understand where it came from. I see what the author is trying to do there, but the writing around it just doesn't feel well done. Layla is supposed to be in charge of creating the food menu, but she's having a really difficult time with her baking and finding some inspiration. And because of that, it's putting a strain on her relationship with her best friend. Or so we're told. I never felt that in the book at all, so I wasn't sure where Layla was getting it from. And then finally, Layla struggles with her memories of her mom in this one in particular, because her mom was a big proponent of beauty pageants, and then also her PTSD from the prior book. Yeah, I think that was it. So many side plots, just so much going on. So in the end, like, this was fine. It was a very easy read. It was simple enough that I could like toss on the audiobook and keep up with the story without thinking too much about it. But a lot of the time, the content itself was pretty eye-roll worthy. So in the end, this came out to a 3-star on my cow pile breakdown. I have such conflicting feelings. Next up, I spent most of July reading Harrow the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir, which is the second book in the Locked Tomb series. If you're unaware, this series has officially taken over my life. I'm obsessed with these characters. This continues off of the first book, Gideon the Ninth, which I can give you a pretty simple synopsis, is following lesbian necromancers who are sent to a abandoned Gothic palace to try and find some secret hidden within. That's what I'm gonna give you. But at the same time, it would take me like 45 minutes to give you a broader synopsis. I am shocked that I came to like Harrow as much as I did in this one, because I absolutely detested her when we met her in Gideon. On top of that, the world building in this universe is so expansive. I thought I had finally figured things out at the end of the first book, but it grows so much more in the second one. I really have to talk about the fact that it's crazy impressive how well done Muir's writing is, because she manages to make me so invested in the story, even though I'm lost and I'm trying to take these little tiny clues, these pieces of breadcrumbs she's left for me to put together and figure out what's going on, you just have to accept that you're gonna be lost, and probably by the end of the book, she'll maybe explain things for you to understand. Even then, you're gonna continue to have questions. You're gonna have more questions. The writing styles she uses to continue your confusion, but also to lean into the story itself and how even those are important elements in the plot. It's so good. This was a wild ride and I loved it. I cannot wait to pick up Nona. I'm so excited for that entire process to start all over and me to once again be completely confused. Thank God this was a 5-star read. It was phenomenal. This is probably the first 5-star fiction book I've had in quite some time. And that makes me so sad, but I am very glad that that streak was broken by this book because it was so good. Next up, I officially finished out my Miss Marvel run with volume 10, Time and Again by G. Willow Wilson. And this was a disappointing note to end on. I think the biggest strength in this series overall is the characters. The finale really focuses on Kamala's relationships with her friends, with Bruno, with her family members. All of those characters I do care for a great deal, and so I really enjoyed seeing her relationship with all of them sort of wrap up with this conclusion. What really let down this final one is the plot. The stories do not tie together at all. There is no underlying point, there's no underlying message. It just made it seem like these final issues were throwaway pieces. That's just so unsatisfying. Like I said with the last volume, I love Bruno, so I really enjoyed seeing more of him. Honestly, that's like the only thing that really stood out with this final volume, and that's such a shame. I do know that Miss Marvel's story does continue in a new run after this, which is done by a new set of writers. I'm planning to try and pick those up because I'm very intrigued to see if perhaps maybe that's what Kamala needs, is a new set of writers. Maybe these guys had kind of just lost whatever it was they had there in the middle, because it took them a while to find their stride. They finally hit it, and then it just, after like 3 volumes, once again fell. I'm so sad about it because I really enjoy Kamala. I'm very excited for the Marvels movie now. I can't wait to see more of her on screen. This was 3 stars and I am sad about it. But at least I finished a series, so that's nice. Next up, I read Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. This was one of the books that my friend Ali annotated for me, and then I annotated it as I read, and I'm passing it on to my friend Kat. I've already done that, which is why I no longer have a physical copy to show you. I really enjoyed this one. This story is following a woman who ends up becoming a nanny for her childhood best friend's stepchildren, except those kids catch on fire when they throw a tantrum. This book was so strange, and it somehow managed to feel like it wasn't really anything special as I'm reading it, yet it had my heart in a vice the entire way through. I could not believe that such a short book managed to weave its way into my heart the way it did. I cared about Bessie and Roland, the stepchildren, so much. I wanted to wrap them up in a hug the entire time I was reading this story. I even could honestly say the same for Lillian, the nanny who is taking care of the children, because she is dealing with a lot in this book. She's dealing with so much of her own shit, but somehow taking care of these 2 kids is what finally makes her acknowledge that stuff and makes her want to try and work on those things. The climax was so satisfying. It gave me exactly what I was wanting. I will say my one negative I had with this book is that Lillian has a very unhealthy relationship with her childhood best friend Madison, and I wanted that to be addressed a little bit more by the end. There was like a single fight, and then they just never talked about anything again. But at the same time, that was not the focus of the story. The focus was this found family, this discussion around how parents are so impactful in our lives. This definitely gave me very similar feels to like Anxious People by Frederick Bachman or House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I do wish it just had a little bit more oomph to make it a new favorite. So it ended up being 4 stars, but I definitely enjoyed this, and it's so short. I highly recommend it. My nonfiction book for this month was The World Record Book of Racist Stories by Amber Ruffin and Lacey Lamar. This is sort of a spin-off to their prior book, You'll Never Believe What Happened to Lacey, which I read earlier this year. As soon as I finished that one and gave it 5 stars, I went to my library app and requested that they get an audiobook version of this one, because you have to read the audiobook version of these books. Amber and Lacey are absolutely hilarious. Their personality shines through in the audiobook. Their relationship as siblings does as well. I highly, highly recommend reading this audibly if you can. This is exactly what it sounds like. It is a collection of racist stories that Amber and Lacey have dubbed the world record version of this. And oh my God, are these stories terrible and sad, and it's awful that they're still happening nowadays? Absolutely. Are they so incredibly ridiculous that you can't help laughing at these dumb racist people? Yes. Yes, so much so. This is a fantastic time, which is such an odd thing to say about a book discussing racist stories. This one also has stories not just from Amber and Lacey, but also from some of their family members, some of their friends. And those just added to the absolute hilarity of the book, because Amber would be telling a story which was not hers, but it would then remind her of her own personal anecdote that she would slide right in before continuing the other person's story. Like I said, you have to listen to these via audio. They're fantastic. Oh my God. I had to give this one 5 stars as well, because I was just laughing the entire time. And then lastly, I read Soul Eater Volume 3 by Atsushi Ohkubo. It's been a minute since I talked about this manga series. Soul Eater is one of my all-time favorite animes, so I've been wanting to try and continue reading the manga. Basically, in this world, we have people who fall into 2 categories. You have meisters, like this guy right here, and then you have weapons, which are these 2. They literally turn into weapons that eventually, if they collect 99 evil souls and a single witch soul, will be able to be utilized by the Shinigami Lord Death himself. They will become death scythes. We are mainly following 3 teams who are trying to do this, and they go to school at the, oh shoot, what's it called? The DWMA, but what does that stand for? Death Weapon Meister Academy, maybe? I read 2 volumes of this earlier this year and was really excited to continue reading the series, only I forgot that this one is focusing on Excalibur, who, you know, Excalibur is a famous weapon, and in this world, weapons are also humans. He's something, I'll put it that way.
Excalibur, Excalibur.
And then the other story arc in this one revolves around Black Star and 𝗖cie, one of the other Meister weapon teams we follow. And Black Star is my least favorite, but I gotta say, 𝗖cie definitely shines in her story arc with it. And I do appreciate that Black Star is such a cheerleader for 𝗖cie. We see a little bit of how they became friends and why their personalities work so well together, because Black Star is the freaking worst and 𝗖cie is a saint for putting up with him. Apart from him though, I do love the characters in this universe. I adore the story itself. We're starting to get a little bit more exploration of the main plot that is being set up for the whole series, and I am so excited to get further into this. I had to give this one 4 stars because, again, Excalibur, Black Star, but I still had a great time continuing to read it. That is it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!